I am delighted to be joined today by Alice Nash, who I'm just going to hand straight over to and ask to introduce herself.
Oh, thanks very much, Heledd. All right, so as Heledd says, I'm Alice Nash. I'm a barrister specialising mostly in professional negligence, clinical negligence, and costs law. That's me. If you want me to expand a bit on what that actually means in
I mean,
English.
that's three quite discrete areas, isn't it? I know negligence turns up twice in that
Yeah.
sentence, but actually, professional negligence, clinical negligence, and costs. And
Hmm.
I suppose maybe costs pulls them together.
Yeah,
I,
that I mean, to some extent it does. Well, like professional negligence, it can touch on all areas of law because I mean, it costs basically is everybody arguing at the end about how much the lawyers should get paid, and it doesn't really matter what the underlying work was that has given rise to these costs. So that's quite interesting because it involves kind of dabbling in a lot of different areas of law to understand what the underlying proceedings were all about, actually why they were so expensive. And similarly, in professional negligence, uh, obviously that means you know a law arising from professionals messing things up, and that can be all kinds of professionals, like accountants. There's a whole subset of prof neg, which is construction professional negligence. But certainly, and I think quite a lot of people predominantly deal with lawyers' negligence. And
what,
again,
pardon?
I know,
I
shockingly,
know.
lawyers do sometimes mess up because, after all, we are all human. And also, lawyers and certain other professionals have compulsory insurance regimes. So there is money there if something goes wrong, which is an important consumer protection um, principle. And so, so there's lots of very sort there's lots of litigation, I'm afraid, against solicitors and barristers, and it involves sometimes getting to know, having to get to grips with something which isn't your day-to-day bread and butter. That's one of the things that keeps it interesting.
And yeah, and I think there's two things you said there. And I think before we started recording, we were saying,
Mm,
we getting cases which are brand new and you've
mm,
never had to deal with before is just comes with the territory these days, doesn't it? Where you sit there and go, this is yet another exam question that's landed on my desk. What do I do with it? And also, I think that point you make that actually, as regulated legal professionals, we come with insurance, which
mm,
when I'm actually advising clients, I do use as a plus point. I say,
yeah,
if you're going to appoint a professional executor or a professional attorney, we at least come with indemnity insurance if something goes wrong. Your friends and
mm,
family don't.
yeah,
So you do think carefully when you are asking people to do something, do they have the relevant skills and expertise? But actually, do they have the financial backing? So
yeah. Mm,
whilst of course none of us want to sort of end up on the wrong side of that conversation, as you say, things do go wrong. People are human, and that is what insurance is for
yeah. Yeah,
ultimately.
absolutely. Well, I mean, ultimately, I think if we weren't insured, how many of us would want to do the job? It is that safety net, and as you say, of course, nobody wants to make a mistake. I hope we all try very hard not to. I mean, it's there for your protection as well, of course, as much as your clients. But that is a very good point you make about, sometimes the availability of insurance is almost the most important thing. I mean, a number of times I've been asked to recommend a lawyer for something particularly conveyancing. And this is absolutely no shade on conveyancing lawyers, but it goes wrong quite a lot. And one of the reasons for that is actually because they're not paid enough. It's a real kind of grudge purchase, and nobody wants to pay a conveyancing solicitor very much. I always think it's extraordinary because estate agents get quite a lot of money, usually in a sort of standard house purchase transaction, because they get a percentage of the value of the house, and the conveyancing solicitors get a few £100s. And doing it properly takes a long time. And if there's anything kind of complicated, things can get missed when people are under extraordinary heavy workloads and all this kind of thing.
Mm.
And so what I often say is that you've just got to make sure that the firm's got at least two principals, um, and that's basically it, because then your chances of having effective insurance are higher, because the way that the solicitor's insurance works is that, unfortunately, if your solicitor is fraudulent, which does sometimes happen, um, then the insurance may be void. But if as long as there are innocent partners involved or innocent members of the firm or LLP involved, the insurance will still be effective. So that's always what I say. I mean, actually, often just using a firm that's on the panel of the lender is fine because they will have done those sorts of checks. And it almost, that almost matters more than anything else.
Mm. And it's interesting because having for my sins done conveyancing
Mm.
and agricultural land and lots of unregistered land, which is just a joy in its own right.
Mm.
Yes, the pressure that is on, and I sort of I remember sort of when I was sort of training, it was pre 2008 bust, and it was like 28 completions on a Friday
Yeah.
on your desk, and it was like and the pressure is there, and the speed is there,
Mm.
and that sort of well, I don't understand why you need to do all this. And I remember I just got to one stage with one client, and I said, if you want to just hand over however many hundreds of thousands of pounds to those people and get into your house and find out you can't get to the front door, be my guest. And he went, oh. And I went,
Mm.
the reason you're being chased by the developer to complete today is, should we just look at the date, shall we? It's month end. And he had a complete light bulb moment. He went, I'm so
Mm.
sorry. And
Mm.
I'm so sorry about this. I realize you are acting for me.
Mm. Yeah.
And it was one of those moments where I just went, I just don't like I just don't know what to say to you to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm not doing it for the
Mm.
good of my health. I'm actually doing it for the good of
Yes.
your health. And yes, on completion day, you'd go, oh, excellent. Lawyers get X pounds, and estate agents get
Yeah.
X, multitude of
thousand
five.
pounds. Yes. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
some estate agents are
Well, it's
lovely. I will say that some have been enormously
mm,
helpful, in the scheme of things. But yeah,
yeah.
it is hard.
Mm. Yeah, well, not and not criticizing anyone, but I think I mean, there seems to be a misconception amongst some of the public that it's, that's an easy thing to do, possibly contributed to by the fact the fees are generally quite low.
Yeah.
And you see people, I mean, if I sort of see on below the line on the Guardian or something, I mean, sometimes people be like, well, I did my own conveyancing, it's really not that difficult. I'm like, well, I really hope that there's nothing wrong with your title, for example, because you can't see yourself if there is. And particularly, I think someone was talking about having done their own conveyancing for a leasehold flat, and I just thought, well, that's just a really bad idea. Um, yes, your
Just makes
face
me really
says it.
nervous.
Yes, says it all. And also people sort of saying, because they're on a sort of, I think it was on the street WhatsApp group. Someone was like, can anyone recommend a conveyancer? Because I've been quoted this ridiculous fee. So I asked what was the fee, and I thought it was perfectly reasonable. And like I sort of, you have to remember what's involved and what's at risk if it goes wrong. And perhaps, I don't know if they went with the allegedly unreasonably highly priced solicitor. But I did say you have to think about what steps they're going to have to cut out if they're going to do it for less than that.
Indeed, and I think as everything, we've seen the sort of race to the bottom and the devaluing of the services and the legal skills, and we're always going to be under attack for something or other. And of course the big threat at the moment is AI. Because
Mm,
again, so going back to sort of 2008, it was always going to be Tesco law. Tesco law is going
yeah,
to take over the world, and you think, well, hang on, you know,
yeah,
as a profession, we might have split off into barristers and solicitors,
mm,
in what 200 years ago,
but
but lawyers per se, we've been knocking around for a while.
mm,
And I think it's that adaptability, isn't it? There are things that aren't going to be needed or as relevant, but the ability to apply the law is.
yes, yeah, absolutely. And
Uh,
of course, in professional negligence, we're all quite interested in how liability is going to develop in circumstances where AI goes wrong.
yeah.
And there's lots of very interesting sort of conceptual discussion around whether an AI bot could be a sort of legal person for the purposes of liability. How do you
Mm.
insure it? How do you determine? I mean, it seems to me that we might have to have a whole new conceptual framework for something like negligence because it's all based at the moment on the concept of what the reasonable person would do, and in professional negligence is what the reasonable professional would do, and the way that you establish that um, in professions other than the law, side note, doesn't usually happen in lawyers' negligence cases because the idea is that judges just know all the law, so they don't need any expert assistance in relation to what a reasonably competent lawyer would have done. But in other professions, you usually have to have a relevant expert who does the thing. And so you can see that there are some kind of AI applications where you might be able to fit it into that conceptual framework, did but that all comes back to trying to identify some human person who has messed up. Did somebody write this code wrong or
Yeah.
something like that? But what if it gets to a point where it's much too complicated for us to trace it back in that way? I mean, I wonder whether some kind of strict liability or whether you're going to have to do it on a contractual basis. So you you contract with the supplier of this artificial intelligence product, and you would have to write into the contract that it's got to achieve a certain result, a certain only a certain proportion of error will be tolerated, for example. And so if more errors than that are made, then that falls to their insurance to deal with. But it's all, I mean, it's difficult to conceptualize in the abstract, but I think we are probably going to have to develop new ways of thinking about compensation for things going wrong, that to fit with the brave new world. But what I think is very likely is that we'll be able to do away with the idea of law to deal with those things.
Yes, it's because it's scaffolding in the structure, isn't it?
Mm,
And I think sometimes I have to take a deep breath and take a step back. When you're in the middle of drafting documents and you're busy doing things, you sit there going, actually, what I'm doing is taking a statute, taking statutory instruments, taking case law, taking theories and applying it to a particular set of circumstances. I'm not just creating a piece of paper.
mm,
And so I saw some clients yesterday, and they'd done some powers of attorney previously, and they wanted to change their minds about who's doing it. And they went, I said, look, this looks like a piece of paper, and if you go on government websites, it very much is a piece of paper where you just fill in boxes and out churns a power of attorney. I said, but what does that piece of paper do?
mm,
And so we went through all the Medical Capacity Act, Code of Practice, what roles of an attorney were, and this, that, and the other. And they went, oh, like light bulb moment of, oh, it's not just you filling in a form for me. Like, and no, I'm not. I am telling you why this form exists, what it does, what you get to achieve with it. And I think sometimes that can get lost. It certainly, I would say sometimes lost in the noise when you're doing the day
mm.
job, because
Yeah.
it's very much like it's in your head, isn't it? You spent decades learning and absorbing and having enough funds to buy your books to refer to when you need to, or hoping your sort of your firm or chambers has got a copy of the white book to go and have a nosy at. But
Mm,
there is so much of it that is in your head that is then
mm,
applied, and then I think that's a really interesting thing for me. That sort of we read about trainees and juniors all the time getting into all sorts of trouble,
mm.
but actually you can get into trouble at all stages in your career, can't you?
Yes, yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, in fact, I find it sort of reasonably a frequent phenomenon in the on the clinical negligence side that it can be quite senior doctors sometimes. And this is again obviously by no means all doctors, but sometimes you find that I mean, either there's a kind of not necessarily keeping up with the sort of modern ways of doing things, but actually much more is the ones who actually are extremely skilled, but they have such confidence in their abilities that they actually perhaps stop being quite so careful. But it's a really difficult balance because to some extent you do need those people who can um, just kind of make a call and just sort of say, I've been doing this for years and years, and I've just got a gut feeling that this is what is wrong and this is the right solution for it. I haven't watched. Have you watched the Henry Marsh program, which came out on the BBC a week or so ago about the
No.
neurosurgeon Henry Marsh? I haven't seen it yet, but I really want to because I read his book, Do No Harm. Um, because he's an example of the exact opposite of that. And he was incredibly skilled at the top of his profession, but he's absolutely haunted by the things that went wrong as well. So he, I think, always, um, you know, remained conscious of the very great responsibility that he held in his hands, and his power to possibly make things better, but also to make things catastrophically worse. He's absolutely fascinating man. So I'm really looking forward to
Ooh,
watching that on catch up at some
yes.
point.
That sounds perfect. I mean, I think
Mm,
that sort of thing sounds absolutely perfect,
mm,
ideal, isn't it? And I think talking the medical profession,
mm.
to be read the Atul Gawande
Yes, I read Being Mortal.
Be Mortal's really good, but it's
Mm.
the checklist.
Oh yes, 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 yeah, yeah. I
That's
haven't read his book about
brilliant.
that, but yes, yeah. I think I've seen him speak about that actually. Yeah.
It's brilliant, and it goes all about it's
Mm,
about checklists and how it reduces incidence of this, that, and the other. And the bit I really like about it is they've gone to huge effort, globally, pulling people together.
mm,
They've done this checklist, and they come to the first day that they're going to use the checklist in surgery, and it's huge expectations. And they sit down, and then they give the checklist to the person, and there's complete silence.
mm.
Sort of looking around, and they go, "Oh yeah, we forgot to tell you to read it out loud."
Yeah. Oops. So step one, read checklist.
Step one, new checklist. So
Uh,
despite all
Out
this
loud.
effort,
Yeah.
because the person read it, they read it, they went, okay.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
no, no, we're supposed
No, 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 because
to,
it's about communication, actually. That was one of
about
the kind of key
communication.
things about it. Yes,
And it's
hilarious.
genius. And
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
loved it. I loved all this highbrow thinking. And it was like, we just missed the really
Mm,
basic bit. There's another brilliant book, and it's called Why We Make Mistakes.
okay, I haven't heard of that. That sounds really interesting.
Well, I will send you the link. It is really, really interesting. And again, one of the ones, again, it's a medical thing. And
Hmm.
it was, I think it was in America. And it was like, they couldn't work out why there were over the odds number of deaths going on in theatres caused by anaesthetists. They're like, of all of the people in the room, the
Mm,
anaesthetists are like, they've got everything under control because they've got the whole picture. And they couldn't work it out. They couldn't work it out. And they realised there were two different manufacturers of kit that
mm,
dosed, gas, air, whatever. And one manufacturer, the knob you turned clockwise, and the other one you turned anti-clockwise.
oh no.
And they said, so in the moment, you've got these anaesthetists, and they haven't remembered to check which manufacturer that kit they've got in front of them. So they went back to the manufacturers and said, can you just both agree to go the same way?
Yeah, yeah.
Boom, drops.
Oh,
Number of death
that
drops.
sounds yes, that sounds a fascinating book. Actually, it sounds very similar to there's a podcast I like with Tim Harford, who is on Radio 4, does more or less, the Economist stuff. But the podcast is called um, Cautionary Tales. And it's about all sorts of things like that. It's about accidents, or many of the episodes about sort of accidents that have, and he sort of unpicks what went wrong. And often it's something like that. Often these things were entirely avoidable if someone had just spotted the potential for something to go wrong in this. And the one that I'm thought of when you were telling that story is about essentially it was about a plane sort of disintegrating in midair, and it turned out that, and it had sort of recently been serviced, I think, so everyone was what's gone wrong. It turned out that there were two different sorts of bolts used in actually putting the aircraft together, and they were incredibly similar in size, and they looked identical, and one of them was fractionally smaller, and so of course if you put that in the wrong place it worked loose and the whole thing went horribly wrong. And so again, it was a sort of really easy fix of like making them different colors. Or you might also posit that it's a really good idea to just try and use all the same size bolts everywhere in your aircraft, so that nobody's ever tempted to just substitute a different one. But it's a similar sort of thing, isn't it? It's like, when you look at that, there's an obvious potential for a mix-up that goes horribly wrong.
And it's really interesting, and different professions, how they deal with it, and what you put in place. And I've got some good friends, and who are engineers, and
Mm,
they're really like safety conscious, and
mm,
they've got checklists, and they're like, nothing goes out of the building unless it's been checked by two or three people.
mm.
And I'd be like, yeah, but I'm just allowed to do what I want. And I'm like, well, he went, why do you,
You're not going
why
to
did,
kill
what,
anybody, though. That's
exactly. It's like, I was like, well, for getting a spare pair of eyes on something. And so introduce that
yeah.
with team members. And suddenly you go, oh, my life is so much better because somebody's gone, oh, well, do you notice that thing? And actually that reduces it. And
Mm.
I wonder if it's almost a shame thing, because I don't know whether we're just trained to be sort of independent and isolated and know the answers. And actually, they're going, can you just sense check that for me?
Well,
Is
that
really
comes up.
useful.
Yeah, that comes up, doesn't it, quite a lot in you mentioned earlier about, we see these horrible, sad cases of sort of junior lawyers messing up, particularly messing up, covering up, and then getting in more trouble for the cover up.
Yeah.
And every time people say, well, this is because we teach lawyers to be too perfectionist. In the sense, and obviously you want the ultimate work product to be excellent. But is it realistic, particularly for juniors, to expect them to just know from the get-go after they've had their couple of years of training, um, exactly what to do? And that's why, I mean, actually, at the bar, I mean, the BSB has sort of put in place certain things in recent years, which I think are supposed to make it more normal for junior people to ask questions. So everybody now has to have a qualified person who's the sort of designated person in their chambers that they can go to, essentially to just say, can you sense this check? I tend to check this. I found this a bit tricky, whatever. I mean, in my chambers, we've always very much had a kind of open door policy and always say to the pupils when when they qualify and they're taken on. Um, in some ways it's easier being a junior tenant in the first couple of years because during pre-pupillage, which is your sort of year-long audition for a permanent place in chambers, I think you don't really feel as if you can ask, you certainly don't ask senior members of chambers anything because you're trying to demonstrate to them that you're brilliant and you can do it all yourself.
Yes.
But happily, as soon as, I mean, first thing, just to reassure anybody who might be at that stage and just terrified at the prospect. I mean, it is pretty horrible pupillage. I think it's unavoidable that it's a year of a lot of pressure. We do our absolute best to try and make it as unstressful as it can be, but that situation is always going to be challenging. Um, but the good thing is, as I say, just to reassure, obviously, when we kind of mark pupils' work, we do it on the basis that they're a pupil. We're not expecting them to necessarily
Yeah.
get everything right. But also, once you are on your feet and you're doing things that actually have an impact on clients in the world, then of course, we would much rather that people come and say, "Does this sound right?" And what was also, when I was doing it, was always really nice to see. I remember going to ask a silk in Chambers. Uh, if he thought I had the law right on this problem. And while I was chatting to him, another Silk in Chambers came in to ask him a question. Another time I was junior to a Silk in Chambers, and he was like, "Well, let's just ask Michael Pools, who was the head of Chambers at the time." Who was a very eminent professional negligence barrister who sadly retired quite recently, and we all miss him very much because Michael's door was always open and he always liked chatting about things with junior members of chambers, and even seeing that even quite senior people were happy to say, "I would like to, um, you know, give this a sense check," I think is really important.
And it is the most liberating thing.
Mm,
And I discovered it as soon as I went, can I just can I just check something with you? Because I'm beginning to doubt myself. And somebody went, you were right to question that because that isn't straightforward.
mm,
And it was that point you're going, oh, it's okay not to know things. And
mm,
since that point, it's been hugely helpful to go, oh, I'm just going to phone a friend.
yeah.
And I think, this probably segues quite nicely into sort of talking about the LinkedIn network that's
Mm,
been developing, because that's how we met.
mm,
And you very kindly helped me out on something the other day, which, was like, thank you so much, because hugely helpful to just be able to go, if this is going to take more than 2 minutes of your time, it's complicated and we need to look at it properly. But if it's
mm,
something that's dead easy, you're going to be the one who knows.
yeah.
And actually, either of those are fine, because either there is an answer and I've missed it, or
Mm.
this is more complicated than any of us know what to do with, which is also fine because there's a solution. We just don't know what it is yet.
Yes, exactly. And as you say, it's sometimes it's just reassuring to know, no, you're not missing something that's hard. Is,
Yes.
you
And
know,
that's nice. That's going,
mm,
oh, good. It is hard. And hard's okay because we're expected to do hard.
yeah,
Law is hard. And if it's hard, we'll get to the bottom of it. But that sort of, that sort of, and I think it's that point, isn't it? You go, I'm going to sit here and worry about it. I'm going to ask somebody about it, or I'm just going to blithely trot off and do it. And that's probably
Mm,
the point where you get the negligence piece, isn't it? Where you go, just because you can doesn't mean you should have.
mm, yes.
You know, and I think there is that. There is a line. Well, it is a line, isn't it? It's a very grey line from,
Mm,
decision paralysis
yeah.
to blithely doing something idiotic, and everything in between, and which is an honest mistake, which is negligence, which is appropriate, and I think we're all probably generally quite worried about sort of being found out, that we've done something wrong, and
Yeah.
but then
Well, I said
it
to someone the other
happens.
day, you should try doing professional negligence because if you spend most of your professional life scrutinizing the actions of other lawyers, it does tend to make you rather anxious, I have to say. It's perhaps not the best for the kind of peace of mind, but
No, no, or you possibly just
mm.
go, actually everybody's getting it wrong.
Yeah, well, also, and what I often, I mean, I have sometimes, I've had junior members of chambers kind of come to me in a total panic, kind of going, oh, I'm really worried that I'm not sure that I'm right about this, or blah, blah, blah. And eventually I was to say, look, because as I said earlier, obviously, the test for negligence is no reasonable person would have done this. Right? You're a clever person, you've thought about this, you've given the advice that you've given for reasons. It's very
Yes.
unlikely, it may not work out the way you are hoping that it will, because that can happen without anybody having made a mistake. It's just that, sometimes it's not possible to say that there's a right answer, and particularly with, calls about strategy. Litigation, which is what we're dealing in, obviously at the bar, is to some extent, it's a game of poker. It's a strategy game. It's a gamble, and things do sometimes go wrong. But basically, if you've thought about it and you've given the advice you've given for reasons, it's unlikely to be negligent. That's obviously not a cast iron guarantee because you
No.
might have thought you were being terribly careful and you just happened to miss a material thing. But this comes back to what it said at the beginning. That's why we have insurance, because just in case something
Yes.
goes horribly wrong, and most of us hope we're never going to have to use it. And I don't know a lot of people who have had to, but other than my
No.
clients, obviously. But
Yes, yes. Do you think the number of files that get dealt with in conversations in a year, and and actually probably proportionally these isn't that
yeah,
much. And then stuff. We're all quite blasé about car insurance. Like, oh, of course
yeah,
I got car insurance. Like, car, get into an accident. That's what happens. Obviously we don't want to lose our no claims, but
yeah.
and I think we understand that as a prerequisite for driving. So
Mm, mm,
why are we so like, it's prerequisite to practice, but actually it's okay that it's there.
mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's such a good point because I mean, it sort of goes to the idea that perhaps we, you know, as you say, we do in other areas of life accept the possibility that mistakes will be made and that we have to kind of put things in place. Also, a very senior, well, he was a judge actually. I was doing when I was a student, I was doing marshalling with a High Court judge on circuit, and he was giving me career advice. And one of the things he said was, "You have to remember, you will get sued." But then, similar sort of things, as long as you've given your advice for reasons, it's probably going to be fine. He was like, I've been sued 2 or 3 times in my career. I have to say, I mean, I haven't touched wood, not yet, in fact. But his point was actually, it is possible for somebody to see you, and it doesn't necessarily even mean you've done anything wrong. It could just be that the outcome wasn't what they hoped, and
And
all of that
there
sort of
is
thing.
that, isn't there? There is that, and I'll sit there and go, I'm talking about sort of potential contentious probate claims, that they're rumbling, or they're going to
Mm,
kick off at some point because you're trying to head them off the pass, and you go, and I sit there and people go, there are just people who will just make a nuisance themselves. You have
mm,
to understand that somebody will just rattle cages just to see what happens, or rattle trees
mm,
to see what falls out. They have no real basis for this, but actually, will you just roll over? And I had a boss in my early career. Client had said something, and I sort of went, oh, wobble. And he went, just don't roll over and have your tummy tickled. Stop and
mm,
think. Have you done it? What have you done? Was it right? Can you back it up? Oh, you don't want to go
mm.
back to them. And pick up the phone and go back to them. And I was like, hang on. on the phone now, talk to them. He said, how was that? And I went, utterly terrifying, but we resolved it.
Sounds like a good boss.
Yeah, he had his moments.
Mm.
But certainly it's that sort of thing. But and again, I don't, sort of obviously we just finished sort of exam season or result season, haven't we? We've had degree results, A levels, GCSEs, and what have you. And still to this day, I come out cold sweats. That going to sit my A levels and I don't know which exam
Yeah.
it is. And I think, but it's that perfection, isn't it? It's like, oh, it's a straight A's or straight nines or
Mm.
it's all this. And I go, you train to get that level of perfection, but the
Mm.
reality is you're never going to get that in reality. Like I said before, a litigator I worked with once, he went, well, in our world, 51% is good enough.
Mm.
So there's a big gap between 51% and 100.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting that professionally, of course we're going to get it right because that's what we're here for. And I'm not advocating that we're not going to get it right, but I think
Mm.
a
Sure.
lot of it depends on what areas of work you're in, aren't you? And whether you are
Mm.
risk averse or whether you are sort of, a bit more gung ho with things, or whether you are under pressure. We mentioned conveyancing, that
Yeah.
there's always a lot of money involved in conveyancing.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it's
I
the
mean, this
most
is again,
expensive
it
thing
comes
you're
back
going to
to why I'm,
buy.
well, quite. I mean, this is why I come back to I'm always a little surprised. I mean, I understand because in some ways it's like, we're feeling squeezed enough already after spending all this money on this house. But it's like, given that you're spending all this money on this house, it's probably worth paying a little bit more just to make sure that there's not some horrible, um, horrible unexpected disaster, like the
Yeah,
roof terrace that you thought that you were getting, it's not actually part of the demise or whatever.
yeah.
It's sort of, which happened to a friend of mine when she was buying her first flat. That it was all advertised in the estate agents' particulars and everything as having this wonderful roof terrace, and then it turned out wasn't
Oh,
demise to the property at all. And they got it
oh,
sorted out, and she was like, well, I'm not buying it if it doesn't have a roof terrace, and it was all
which is fair.
yes. And it all got sorted, and she got her roof terrace, as against what would have happened if she'd actually already bought it when she discovered that
Yes.
she was trespassing when she went up there.
God, can you imagine?
Well, quite. And so this is things that did that kind
Get
of
off my
buying peace
land.
of mind. Yes, quite. This buying peace of mind sort of thing. Important. But I mean, coming back to as well the sort of different areas, different levels of risk as well. I mean, it's the same in medicine. That's why I always think it's difficult when people sort of suggest publishing kind of league tables for hospitals or particular consultants. And it's like, well, I mean, I said before we started recording, my sister's a consultant geriatrician, so the death rates in her hospital are obviously, in her department are obviously not brilliant, but the success metrics for her are very different. It's sort of whether people were kind of comfortable and had a good death or whatever. Um, or I mean, obviously, actually, geriatrician covers a wide range from people who certainly wouldn't consider themselves geriatric right up to people at end of life. But you see the point, or you're just working in a very high risk specialty like brain surgery.
Yeah. Crikey.
Mm.
And yeah, colleague of mine used to say, don't worry, we save PDFs, not lives.
Yes, well, exactly that. I mean, I always see it's kind of I think it's working as a lawyer is stressful. There's obviously a lot of conversations about you know quite why it seems to be so stressful for some lawyers. Um, and but at the end of the day, um, nobody is going to die. And I think we have to, that's a useful bit of perspective sometimes when you
It,
are
it
feeling
is.
extremely stressed and anxious.
Including you, because I think
Mm.
we've probably all had that moment with like white hot panic and going, I think I'm going to die because
Just can't deal with this. Yeah.
just going to I'm going to go for a walk and come back.
Yeah.
you know, but I think we're better at I think better transparency is helpful and better ability to go, is it me? Am I doing this right? And I
Mm.
think, where we are, I think certainly I feel people are getting better at sort of going, this is not really my bailiwick. I'm not going to
Mm.
dabble.
Mm.
There are people for that.
Yes, absolutely. Bailiwick, great word, by the way. Just
It's a nice one to shoehorn in, isn't it?
yes, absolutely. Oh, I do love these. I do love those old bits of sort of legal terminology that I know we're
Yeah.
supposed to be doing away with because we're all supposed to be showing that we are, in fact, part of the modern world. And
Yes.
by and large, I think this is a good thing. But because I'm a bit of a language nerd, I really like it when I come
I,
across
I
mean
don't think
profits and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think we could be doing our jobs if we weren't language nerds of some description or another, would we? Because I think it's far, because that we are wordsmiths. We're all about, well,
Hmm.
that word's not in the right place in the right order, and look what happened.
Yes.
Or as I
Yeah.
was talking to somebody the other day about, colouring in lines on conveyancing and how that causes all sorts of problems. But and again, the sort of
Yeah.
negligence point there is, that's quite the thing, isn't it? So
Yeah. Here's the thing that the advent, COVID's acceleration of the advent of electronic working has made so much easier because I tend to get PDFs or electronic versions of documents now. So no more, hi, thank you very much for the instructions. The copy plans in my instructions are black and white, and this is all about whether somebody should have spotted that the area hatched green did not correspond with what the person thought they were buying. So
yeah.
please could I have a color copy?
But do you miss bundles in pink ribbon?
Do you know a little bit? Although I had so much pink tape like all over my room all the time. I used to use it for other things though. That's quite useful. I mean, I am a bit of particularly because unfortunately, as I'm getting old, my eyesight's not brilliant. So I'm a bit of a prefer to read things on paper dinosaur, and in particular. I think I've got quite a visual memory. So I used to be very good at kind of going, oh, I know I've seen that crucial document. It's
Yes.
about halfway through bundle three. I just kind of knew that. I have basically embraced paperless. It's obviously great for being able to do it anywhere. I used to have a lot of trouble kind of working from home because it needed so much planning about kind of taking the
Yeah.
correct papers home. Um, so I have, but I've had to put in place systems to make it easier for me to find things that I would have probably been able to just eyeball back in the olden days. But I think, by and large, I think it's a good thing. And obviously, younger, less dinosaur people than me just do it all without a problem. So
And good for them. But again, it is that thing of going. I quite like a piece of paper sometimes for big stuff, and it's like
yeah.
get out and have a proper look at it,
Oh
and
yeah, oh
shuffle it around
especially like
again.
an A3 plan or a big chart or something like that.
Yes.
Lots and lots of numbers. And I do often print myself out a little core bundle. I mean, quite apart from anything else, sometimes it is useful to have different objects in court. Because I mean, I did recently invest in a second screen to take to court so that when I've got my laptop,
Ooh.
it's mostly for doing detailed assessments. You sort of got like the bill and the
Yeah.
points of
Okay.
dispute on different windows and things like that. That's all mostly electronic now, and that is great. Incidentally, doing all of that and actually having it electronically rather than sort of sitting there doing calculations, much better. But uh, when it's when it's something else, when it's sort of lots of documents and wordy, that whole thing of kind of like, can you just stick a finger in page 207 whilst you turn to bundle two, and it's just kind of, when you're dealing with lots of documents,
Yeah.
I find it easier to just have them phically around to do that with.
Yes. Yeah. No. No. Absolutely. And I suppose the other thing is, I mean, thinking about the professional negligence points is like, it it it's you're less likely to drop things down the back of filing cabinets
Yes.
with PDFs. Important documents that you might discover later.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
that's true.
um,
Yeah,
it's
and keeping all
fascinating
your
stuff,
notes
isn't
on the
it?
computer because I am one of those that I find when I'm working on something really tricky, like an exam question type thing, like you say, I do find it really helpful to grab my pen and make manuscript notes and to scribble it all out. But then I have to remember to transcribe it or file it or something because I've got into such a habit now of keeping most of my notes in a kind of working Word document, and I'll kind of make the
Yeah.
note after I've had a phone call and stuff like that, which is brilliant against the time that I ever, God forbid, do get sued, that I will be able to have access to my records much better than I've not used a blue notebook in years, which in a way is a bit sad because that was so emblematic of, I was so excited the first time I wrote in a blue notebook all those years ago. But I've got
Um,
piles and piles of them in my
I
room and I
love
wouldn't
them.
know where to find anything.
No. I love a council's notepad. I really
Yeah.
do. It's a
No,
thing of
but the thing
joy.
is, but they're lovely. But the problem with them is I've completely moved now to those spiral bound ones with perforations down the side, which have got hole punches in them already. So then you make all your notes in the notebook and then rip it out and you can stick it in a folder with everything else.
Game changing.
Yeah, well, these are the things that bring me joy and excitement in my life. I'm
Exactly.
so
Interesting words and stationery. Yeah,
yeah.
tell you you're a lawyer when without saying you're a lawyer.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, stationery. And it's nearly September. And what does September mean?
New
New
pencil case.
stationery, of course. I still can't. I find September more exciting and much more of a kind of New Year feel than the New Year itself. I mean, let's face it,
Absolutely.
especially when you're old, like New Year is crap.
It's
Christmas was
dark.
fun. Yeah, it's dark and miserable. Like, but you've had Christmas now. There's at least 2 more months of winter. I mean, certainly the last thing want to do is start existing on salad. And but I think, and there's no internal queue to buy a new notebook in January, whereas the literal clean sheet of the September notebook still has such a
Exactly. And happy days. You've got the weekend to come, and
yes.
but happy shopping. I think
Well, absolutely. Oh, I've been doing lots of it because we have actual start of term because my daughter's starting secondary school on Tuesday.
Ah,
So I had to do that thing of kind of going through the whole kit list and kind of like,
how
you
fabulous!
know,
How
yes,
fabulous!
bought one of those little math sets that you used to have at
Oh,
school
the
with the. Did
protractor.
you? Would there be? Yeah, but did you? So it has a protractor, two set squares. Like, did in your school career, did you ever use a set square?
No.
No, me neither. Protractors, yes. Compasses, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, ruler probably less often than I should have done. Um,
But good for
but yeah,
drawing neat lines, as we
yeah. I mean,
discovered.
in maths, yes, but I was never one of these people who kind of got the ruler out to underline the date in my work. I was just like,
No.
one, draw a line under it.
Scribble.
Fundamentally not very tidy.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah,
Well,
it's all quite thrilling.
Alice,
She'll lose it all within a couple of weeks, obviously.
absolutely. Alice, it's been
Mhm.
an absolute joy to talk to you about, about sort of your role and where can we
Right.
find you? If
You can find me on LinkedIn, Alice Nash. I'm at Hailsham Chambers, so on the Chambers webpage under barristers, you will find me. But as you know, I do hang out on that LinkedIn quite a bit, and that's probably the easiest place if you want to reach me directly.
Splendid. Well, thank you so much, and I hope your new term shopping continues apace.
Thank you very much. Lovely to see you.
And you.